You water your orchid, and within seconds, ants start pouring out from between the pieces of bark. Your first instinct may be to get rid of them immediately. But before you do that, watch where they go, because the trail they leave behind may tell you more about your orchid than the ants themselves. When people see ants around an orchid, they often assume the ants are attacking the plant. In most home-growing situations, that is not the first thing I would worry about. The more useful question is this: what brought the ants here? Ants are extremely good at finding food, especially sugary food. If they keep returning to the same orchid, there may be something on the plant, inside the pot, or somewhere nearby that is worth following. So instead of starting with a spray bottle, start with an inspection. Look at the direction the ants are moving. Are they walking straight up the flower spike? Are they gathering around a bud? Are they disappearing under a leaf? Are they moving in and out of the potting bark? Or are they simply crossing the pot on their way to something else? Those differences matter. And there is another reason not to rush. Ants can show up around an orchid for several very different reasons, and those reasons do not all require the same response. Sometimes they are following honeydew made by sap-sucking pests. Sometimes the orchid itself may be producing a sugary secretion that attracts them. Sometimes the pot has simply become a convenient place to shelter, and sometimes the orchid is not the source of attraction at all. By the end of this inspection, you should be able to place your plant into one of a few clear situations. Ants with no evidence of pests, ants attracted to a natural sugary secretion, ants connected to a hidden pest problem, ants established in the potting media, or ants that are only passing through from another source. Once you know which situation you have, the next step becomes much easier. The first clue is not the ant. It is what the ant keeps coming back for. Start with the easiest thing to notice: anything sticky. Move slowly around the plant. Check the flower spike, the buds, the underside of the leaves, the joints where leaves meet the main stem, and any place where several ants seem to pause. A clear or shiny droplet can be very small. Sometimes you notice it first because the surface looks glossy. Sometimes your finger feels tacky after touching the edge of a leaf. And sometimes you do not see the sticky material at all until you notice ants repeatedly visiting the same spot. If you find something sticky, do not jump straight to the conclusion that the orchid has a pest infestation. Treat that sticky material as a clue. What you need to know next is who produced it. Several sap-sucking pests feed by taking fluids from plant tissue. Aphids, mealybugs, and some scale insects can produce a sugary waste material called honeydew. Ants are attracted to that food source. In some situations, ants do more than simply drink the honeydew. They may protect or tend the insects that are producing it. That is why ants can sometimes reveal a pest population before the grower notices the pest itself. This changes the way you inspect the plant. Instead of asking, "Where are the ants?" ask, "Where is the food?" And once you find the food, ask, "What is feeding here?" That second question is important because 3 pests can give you a similar first clue, but hide in very different places. Begin with the softest, newest parts of the orchid. If the plant has fresh flower buds, a developing flower spike, tender new tissue, or flowers that have recently opened, examine those areas carefully. Aphids tend to gather where plant tissue is soft and nutrient-rich. They can also be found on the undersides of leaves. Aphids are small, soft-bodied insects. Depending on the species, they may be green, pale, dark, or almost black. What matters more than color is the pattern. You may see several grouped together rather than one isolated insect. You may notice pale shed skins around the colony. A developing bud can look distorted. A tender area can seem crowded with tiny insects, and the surface nearby may feel sticky. Now pay attention to the ants. If they are repeatedly visiting that same tender area, the relationship begins to make sense. The aphids are feeding on the orchid, the honeydew provides sugar, and the ants are coming for that sugar. At that point, removing only the ants would leave the more important plant problem behind. But do not diagnose aphids just because you see ants near a flower spike. Get close enough to confirm the insects. Turn the plant so light reaches the buds from the side. Look underneath, rather than only from above. Check the base of the buds and the back side of the flower spike. If you have a phone with a good camera, zooming in on a still image can sometimes reveal a colony that was difficult to see with the naked eye. This is also a good moment to inspect the plant sitting next to the orchid. Pests do not respect the edge of one pot. If you confirm aphids on one plant, separate that orchid from the rest of the collection while you decide how to treat the confirmed pest. The goal is not to panic. The goal is to stop assuming and start working from evidence. Now imagine you inspect every soft new part and find no aphids. The buds are clean. The flower spike looks clean. The undersides of the exposed leaves look clean, yet the ants keep returning. Do not clear the orchid yet. The next pest is much better at disappearing. Move away from the obvious surfaces and look into protected spaces. On a Phalaenopsis, examine where each leaf joins the center of the plant. Look around the base of the flower spike. Check folds, narrow gaps, and places where one plant part creates a little shelter over another. If the orchid has old, dried sheaths or tight crevices around a spike node, inspect those too. Mealybugs are famous for making an infestation easy to underestimate. A small population can hide where the plant naturally creates cover. What you are looking for is not a smooth spot or a hard bump. Mealybugs often appear as small, whitish insects surrounded by a powdery or cottony-looking material. A tiny white patch tucked deep in a leaf joint can be easy to dismiss as dust, dried residue, or a fragment of potting material. But ants can make that hidden location more obvious. If an ant repeatedly walks up the same leaf, disappears into the same narrow joint, stays there for a moment, and then leaves, inspect that exact place. Do not just scan the leaf and move on. The trail is giving you a map. If you find a cottony white cluster, look beyond the first visible patch. Check the opposite side of the plant. Look lower, look under leaves, check around the flower spike. And remember that mealybugs can also occur around roots, which is one reason a persistent problem can sometimes be harder to eliminate than the first visible insects suggest. The important point is that the ant is still not the diagnosis. The confirmed mealybug is the diagnosis. This distinction keeps you from treating the wrong target. An ant walking over a leaf may be annoying. A mealybug feeding in a protected crevice is actually taking sap from the orchid. And because mealybugs can produce honeydew, they can create the exact sugary attraction that keeps ants returning. If you confirm mealybugs, isolate the orchid from nearby plants and inspect the rest of the collection carefully. A single visible white cluster should make you check for more, especially in folds and sheltered areas. Treatment methods vary, and whatever product or method you use should be appropriate for orchids and used according to its label or instructions. The important thing in this video is the order of operations. Confirm the pest first, then treat the pest you actually have. But what if you see no aphids and no cottony mealybugs? The ants are still there, the plant still has a suspicious sticky area. Now we move to a pest that may not look like a bug at all. This time, stop looking for movement. Look for something that seems stuck in place. Scale insects can be easy to miss because the adults may sit tightly against the plant beneath a protective covering. Instead of seeing something obviously crawling, you may notice a tan, brown, yellowish, or dark bump that looks as if it belongs to the leaf or flower spike. On orchids, scale can establish on the undersides of leaves, down in leaf axils, and in protected areas that are easy to overlook. So examine anything that looks out of place, especially if ants are repeatedly visiting the same area. Compare the questionable spot with the surrounding tissue. Is it part of the leaf, or is something sitting on top of the leaf? Are there several similar bumps nearby? Is there sticky material around them? Do not scrape aggressively at every mark you see. Orchids can have old scars, mineral residue, natural texture, and healed damage. The goal is careful confirmation, not turning every bump into a pest. This is where good lighting makes a difference. Tilt the leaf, look across the surface rather than straight down. Check the underside. Follow the midrib. Inspect the base of the leaf and the protected area near the center of the plant. If the ants are climbing the flower spike, inspect that spike from every side instead of just the front. Some scale insects produce honeydew, so a scale infestation can create the same basic pattern we have already seen. A sap-sucking pest feeds on the orchid, sugary material becomes available, and ants discover it. But again, That pattern is useful only if you confirm the pest. At this point, you may be thinking the mystery is solved. Ants plus a sticky orchid must mean aphids, mealybugs, or scale. And this is exactly where the diagnosis can go wrong. Sticky does not automatically mean infested. Some orchids naturally produce sugary secretions that can attract ants. The American Orchid Society specifically notes this behavior in orchids such as cymbidiums, where sugary material may appear on flower spikes. In nature, relationships between ants and plants can be much more complicated than the simple idea that an ant on a plant must be attacking it. For the home grower, this creates a very important rule. A sugary droplet is evidence that sugar is present. It is not, by itself, proof that an insect produced it. That may sound like a small distinction, but it can completely change what you do next. If you see a shiny droplet on a flower spike and immediately assume scale or mealybugs, you may start applying treatments to a plant that has not yet shown you any pest. If you decide every sticky droplet is natural, you can make the opposite mistake and overlook a real infestation. So how do you tell the difference? You build the diagnosis from more than one clue. First, inspect the sticky area itself. Then, inspect the surrounding tissue. Look for living insects, colonies, cottony material, fixed scale-like bumps, distorted tender growth, shed aphid skins, or other signs that support a pest diagnosis. Next, look at the pattern of ant activity. Are the ants clustered around a visible colony? Are they visiting several droplets along a clean flower spike with no pest evidence anywhere nearby? Are they disappearing into a leaf joint where you have not yet looked closely? The pattern matters. Then inspect the rest of the orchid. A clean-looking flower spike does not cancel a mealybug hidden at the leaf base. A clean leaf does not cancel aphids grouped around a bud. You are trying to understand the whole plant, not win an argument with one sticky spot. This is also why I would not recommend tasting plant secretions or using smell as your diagnostic test. You do not need to do anything like that. Visual inspection, pest confirmation, and the behavior of the ants give you much safer and more useful information. If you find sticky droplets, but a careful inspection reveals no aphids, no mealybugs, no scale, no suspicious colony, and no other pest evidence, natural plant secretion becomes a reasonable possibility. That does not mean you never look again. It means you do not treat an unconfirmed infestation as if it were certain. Keep the plant under observation. Check it again when you water. Inspect new growth as it develops. Look underneath leaves periodically. If the ant activity changes or a new sign appears, reassess the diagnosis. This is one of the most valuable habits in orchid care, separating a clue from proof. A wrinkled leaf is a clue. It is not automatically proof that the plant needs more water. A yellow leaf is a clue. It does not automatically tell you whether the cause is age, root trouble, stress, or something else. And ants are exactly the same. Their presence gives you a reason to inspect. It does not give you permission to skip the inspection. Now there is another important question. What if the ants are not spending much time on the leaves, buds, or flower spike at all? What if most of the activity begins and ends inside the pot? Go back to the place where this mystery started, the bark. A transparent orchid pot is extremely useful here because you can observe both roots and insect movement without immediately disturbing the plant. Look through the side of the pot. Are ants moving only across the surface, or are they repeatedly traveling through gaps in the bark? Do you see activity near drainage holes? When you water, do a few ants appear, or does a concentrated stream emerge from several places in the media? Those are different situations. One ant walking across a pot does not mean there is a colony inside it. Even several ants on the rim may simply be part of a trail. But repeated movement into and out of the media, especially from consistent entry points, suggests that the pot itself deserves a closer inspection. Before you pull the orchid out of its pot, look at everything you can see from the outside. Check the bark. Is it still chunky and airy, or is it breaking down into smaller, darker material? Look at the roots through the pot. Healthy Phalaenopsis roots commonly appear silvery when dry and turn greener when wet. while dead or badly damaged roots may look brown, hollow, flattened, or mushy. Ants do not automatically tell you that the roots are unhealthy, so do not combine two separate diagnoses without evidence. Also check the drainage holes and the space underneath the pot. A decorative outer pot, saucer, bench, or shelf can create hidden pathways that make it look as if every ant is coming from the orchid media when the trail is actually passing behind or underneath the container. If the ants clearly are using the media as shelter, that still does not mean you have to perform an emergency repot the second you see them. Ask whether the orchid has another reason to be repotted. Is the medium badly decomposed? Are roots declining? Is drainage poor? Is the plant unstable? Is there a persistent pest problem in the root zone that cannot be addressed without inspection? Those facts matter more than fear. Disturbing a healthy orchid unnecessarily can create stress of its own, especially if the plant is in active bloom or the root system is tightly established. On the other hand, if the media is already degraded or the root zone clearly needs attention, the ant activity may be one more reason to inspect and correct the potting situation. The point is not never repot for ants, and it is not always repot for ants. The point is to make the decision based on the condition of the pot, media, roots, and the level of ant activity together. And before you blame the bark, follow the trail one more time, because the seventh reason may have almost nothing to do with the orchid. Instead of watching only where the ants end up, turn the investigation around and look at where they are coming from. Trace the line away from the orchid. Does it continue across the shelf? Does it disappear behind a window frame, down a table leg, along a wall, or toward another plant? Is there a nearby houseplant with sticky leaves or an obvious pest problem? Has anything sugary been spilled on the surface where the orchids are growing? Is the orchid near a kitchen, fruit bowl, pet food area, recycling container, or another place where ants may already be foraging? This is an easy possibility to miss because the orchid becomes the center of your attention the moment you see ants on it. But the plant may simply be sitting on a convenient root. Nearby plants deserve special attention. If another plant has aphids, mealybugs, scale, whiteflies, or another source of honeydew, ants may travel through your orchid area while moving toward that food. So inspect the collection as a group, not as isolated pots. The plant with the most visible ants is not necessarily the plant producing the food. Clean the growing area and watch what happens to the trail. Remove obvious food residue. Check beneath saucers and decorative pots. Look at the back edge of shelves where you normally do not clean. If you can identify the ant's route, you may discover that they enter the orchid pot only because it provides a protected shortcut or temporary shelter. This seventh possibility is important because it prevents unnecessary treatment of the orchid. If the plant has clean foliage, clean new growth, no suspicious sticky areas, no confirmed pests, and no concentrated colony activity in the media, then repeatedly spraying the orchid does not solve a food source located 6 feet away. At this point, we have followed 7 clues, but you do not need to remember 7 separate treatment plans. You can simplify everything you have found into 4 situations. The first situation is the easiest. You see ants, but after a careful inspection you find no pest evidence and no repeating sugary food source on the orchid. In that case, do not treat the plant as if it has a confirmed infestation. Follow the ant trail beyond the pot. Clean the growing surface. Look underneath and behind nearby containers. Inspect neighboring plants. Continue monitoring the orchid when you water. If nothing else develops, the ants may simply have been passing through or exploring the area. Notice the word monitoring. Monitoring is not the same as ignoring. Once ants have called your attention to the plant, take advantage of that warning and check it properly. Look again in a few days, especially at new growth and protected crevices. Pest populations can begin small. A clean inspection today is reassuring, but staying observant costs very little. The second situation is ants plus a sugary secretion on the orchid, but a thorough inspection does not reveal the sap-sucking pests we have discussed. This is where many growers are tempted to choose one of 2 extremes. One person says, "It is sticky, so I must spray." Another says, "Orchids make nectar, so it is definitely harmless." Neither conclusion is strong enough without the rest of the evidence. If the plant appears healthy and repeated inspection finds no aphids, no mealybugs, no scale, and no other pest signs, observe rather than automatically escalating to pest treatment. Note where the secretion appears. Check nearby tissue. Recheck the plant as buds and new growth develop. If insects appear later, your diagnosis changes. If the plant remains clean, you avoided treating a pest that you never confirmed. The third situation is the one that deserves the most attention. Ants plus confirmed aphids, mealybugs, scale, or another honeydew-producing pest. Now you have a real target. Move that orchid away from the rest of the collection if possible. Inspect the neighboring plants. Then choose a control method that is appropriate for the specific pest and safe for the orchid. For a small, localized population, physical removal or carefully applied methods may be enough. A heavier or persistent infestation may require repeated treatment. Whatever you use, follow the product label and avoid assuming that a stronger concentration will work better. More is not automatically safer or more effective. Do not forget the ants when they are actively tending honeydew-producing pests. If you treat the aphids but leave a large ant colony, continuously protecting and redistributing them, the pest problem may be harder to control. The practical goal is to remove the food-producing pest and address the ant access or colony as appropriate for your growing area. If you keep orchids indoors with children or pets nearby, ant and pest control deserves extra care. Use products only as directed. Keep baits and chemicals out of reach, and do not improvise concentrated mixtures simply because a recipe online sounds powerful. The diagnosis first approach is useful here too, because it reduces the temptation to use a treatment you may not need. The fourth situation is clear. Repeated ant activity established inside the potting media. Start by inspecting the pot and root zones thoroughly as you can. If the orchid is in a clear pot, use that advantage. Look for decomposed medium, blocked drainage, failing roots, or other reasons the plant may already need attention. Also, inspect underneath the pot and inside any decorative cache pot, so you know the activity is truly in the media and not just hidden around the container. If the media is still in good condition, roots look healthy, and the plant has no other problem, your response may be different from the response to an orchid sitting in badly broken down bark with declining roots. There is no benefit in pretending those two plants are the same just because both have ants. If repotting is justified by the actual condition of the plant or media, use the opportunity to inspect the root system carefully and replace unsuitable old media with fresh orchid-appropriate material. Keep the pot well drained and choose a setup that allows air around the roots. But do not use repotting as punishment for seeing an insect. Repot because the root zone and media tell you it is necessary. Now, step back and look at how different this is from the first reaction we had when the ants poured out of the bark. At the beginning, the obvious thought was, how do I kill the ants? After the inspection, the useful questions are much more specific. Are the ants following honeydew? If so, which pest is producing it? Are they visiting a clean flower spike with sugary secretion but no pest evidence? Are they established in the media? Or is their trail coming from somewhere else? Those questions lead to completely different actions, and that is why diagnosis has to come before treatment. There is also a practical advantage to thinking this way. Orchid problems often become confusing when several symptoms appear at once. You see ants, a sticky leaf, an old brown root, and a yellowing lower leaf, and suddenly it feels as if the whole plant is collapsing. But those signs may not all share the same cause. Separate them. Confirm the pest before treating a pest. Evaluate the roots before deciding the roots are failing. Evaluate the media before deciding to repot. Look at the age and position of a yellowing leaf before deciding the plant is sick. One observation should lead to the next question, not to the most dramatic conclusion. Ants are a perfect example of this habit because they are easy to see and emotionally hard to ignore. A line of insects marching through a clear orchid pot feels urgent, but urgency and diagnosis are not the same thing. If you remember only one thing from this video, remember this: treat the reason the ants came, not just the ants you can see. That reason may be aphids feeding around tender buds. It may be mealybugs hidden deep in a leaf joint. It may be scales sitting so still that you thought it was part of the plant. It may be natural sugary secretion with no confirmed pest at all. It may be shelter inside the pot. Or the real food source may be somewhere else in the room. The ant trail is information, use it. And there are a few small inspection habits that make this much easier the next time it happens. When you water, do not walk away immediately. Spend a minute watching the pot. Water can disturb insects or make movement easier to notice. If ants suddenly emerge, observe the places they exit. When you rotate the orchid for watering, use that moment to check the underside of the leaves. Most people look at the top surface because that is what they see every day. The underside is where a problem can remain hidden much longer. When a new flower, spike, or buds appear, inspect them occasionally instead of waiting until the flowers look damaged. Tender growth is exactly where aphids can become obvious. When you see something cottony, do not just wipe the visible patch and assume the job is finished. Check the protected spaces around it. When you see a fixed bump, do not automatically call it scale, but do not automatically call it a scar either. Look for a pattern and supporting evidence. And when you see a sticky droplet, remember the most important twist in this whole investigation. Sticky tells you there is sugar. It does not tell you, by itself, who made it. That one distinction can save you from both overreacting and underreacting. So the next time ants appear around an orchid, resist the urge to make the ants the whole story. Follow them. Inspect the sugar source. Check the tender growth and hidden crevices. Look closely at the media and trace the trail beyond the pot. If you confirm a pest, isolate the plant and deal with that confirmed problem. If you find no pest evidence, keep observing rather than treating a problem you have not proven. The most useful thing an ant can do around your orchid may be to make you stop and inspect more carefully. Once you know what the ants are actually responding to, the mystery becomes a practical diagnosis instead of a reason to panic. If this helped you understand what to check before reaching for a treatment, subscribe for more practical orchid care and give the video a like so other orchid growers can find it too. And tell me in the comments what you discovered when ants showed up around your orchids. Pests, natural sticky secretions, activity in the bark, or a food source somewhere else.